Okay, so hi everyone. Welcome to this edition of UK Admit One. So today I'm going to be chatting with Vaishnavi, who's a fourth year medicine student at Cambridge, and she has kindly agreed to help us out and share some of her insights about applying for medicine in the UK generally, and the sort of admissions experience at Cambridge and her life as a medicine student in the UK. So hi Vaishnavi. Hi. So could you tell us a little bit about yourself? If there's anything that I haven't covered, where you grew up and just kind of a little bit of quick background.
Sorry to interrupt. I grew up in India, and I was in a boarding school from year 6 to year 10 in India, and I did the ICSE board there, which is like kind of equivalent to a GCSE. Then I did my A-levels in New Zealand. So I did CIE A-levels in physics, math, bio, and chem. Mm-hmm. And then I came to university in Cambridge.
Okay. So, given that you have such an international sort of background, can you kind of tell us a bit about why you decided to apply to the UK as opposed to anywhere else, India, US, New Zealand? Just what was your thought process for applying to the UK?
Actually, UK wasn't the only country I applied to because I think during my sixth form years, I was a bit confused about what to choose because I was interested in both the physics bits and the bio bits. So I was kind of torn between doing either engineering or some other course in physics or doing medicine.
Okay.
Through the years, I gained experience in actually both. I tried to gain experience in both of those, but I hadn't chosen till the end of till when I had to apply. For medicine, I chose UK because I like the integrated course here, which unlike other countries, sometimes you have to you have to do an undergraduate degree and then do another exam and then do a grad medicine course.
Okay. Yes, in the US, right?
Yeah, so US and some places in Australia have that. Mm-hmm. And I don't really like that pattern because that makes the degree much longer and also you have to do an exam in the middle. So I thought UK was a good option for that. And while I was choosing this, I was in New Zealand and they only have 2 med schools. So it was quite and they also had the bifurcated course. So that wasn't really an option for me. So I think UK was the best choice.
Sure. Okay. So actually that's quite interesting that you talk about the kind of the two part. I suppose that's kind of is that the preclinical and the clinical that you're referring to, or just more kind of the stage at which you start medicine? Because Cambridge has it divided the undergrad medicine course into preclinical and clinical years, doesn't it? Not all universities have that.
I think that bit that you're talking about is different because, the 2 courses I'm talking about is basically in US or Australia, for example, you do a Bachelor of Science or Bachelor of Engineering. Mm-hmm. And then you do graduate medicine, which has both preclinical and clinical bits. It's a 4 or 5 year course. It's very intense because it's quite compact. So it's basically giving a chance for people to do undergraduate course without deciding on medicine because you can go anywhere from there. So it's giving you more flexibility. But if someone's sure that medicine is the one for them, then UK universities are better because they cut down on those extra years that you choose exploring, basically.
Yeah, sure.
But to answer your other question, so Oxford and Cambridge have this traditional course structure, which is they divide their teaching into the first 3 preclinical years, which is more academic, and they're teaching us the content, and the next 3 years is the clinical. So you basically go into hospital, and then you're learning all the clinical skills needed, whereas other universities in the UK kind of integrate the 2, and you learn both of them together through the 6 years.
Okay, great. So if you were kind of torn between the physical sciences, sort of career in engineering or something, and then medicine, how did you settle on medicine in the end? How did you come to make the decision?
I think it was quite difficult because I kept trying out different things and I was like, oh, this is interesting. Oh, this is also interesting. And sometimes that happens when you try a lot of things and you're like, I could see myself doing both of those. But I think when I did a lot of work experience for medicine, so I shadowed a few doctors, and I think one of the main things is you can like a lot of subjects, but if you think the lifestyle suits you and the job would suit you, I feel like in the longer run, that is also a big factor. And I think that was the biggest factor for me for deciding medicine, because I could see myself working as a doctor in a hospital. So I was like,
yeah, right. Yeah. I think that's really important, kind of thinking about the future of it, probably, well, with the professions, like the vocational subjects more than anything else. Because I did modern languages, well, as you know, Vaishnavi. I did Spanish and Italian, and you don't need to see yourself working as a translator, to do. But whereas for you, it is more of a lifetime commitment, really, medicine in general.
Yeah, because there's very little you can do if you've done medicine.
Yeah. Okay, so what would you say you were looking for then? So having decided to apply to the UK for medicine, what were you looking for in a university, and how did you come to choose Cambridge as the one you eventually, like, one of your list? Because obviously it's very competitive for international students. So yeah, tell us a bit about your thought process about the universities you chose, the med schools you chose.
Okay. Well, so first I'd like to just mention that for me, I had to do, so there are 2 admissions tests for medicine in the UK. One's UCAT and one's Bmat. And I had passed the deadline for UCAT because I decided medicine quite late, and that's like in July or August. So I only had the option of Bmat. So that cut down half the universities for me. So Bmat is more like targeting the academic universities in the UK. And I was actually interested in that because, well, I wasn't sure if when I was becoming a doctor, I wanted to do like a research bit with my medicine degree or just like the clinical. And Oxbridge gives like an opportunity in year 4 to choose to do an integrated PhD. So that becomes like it's called Cambridge PhD. So it's a 9-year course, but a lot of people apparently 10% of people at Cambridge choose to do that and integrate like research.
Okay. Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay, that's very interesting. Okay, yeah. Do you have any friends doing that right now? Who went for that option?
I think because of COVID, a lot of people didn't do it because of COVID, because, well, third year at Cambridge and Oxford is also like, you can do your research that year, but we didn't get to do that. And I feel like a lot of people, what they do is at third year, they do a research and they really find it interesting. They feel like continuing it. So they continue it for 3 more years. And then they come back to clinical medicine. So I think because I was kind of confused throughout sixth form, I liked the option of having as many options as possible, if that makes sense. So I was like, this is nice, because what if I go in and I'm like, actually, I like the research side more.
Okay. Yes. No, absolutely. That's fair enough. So what are the other universities you applied to in the UK, if you can remember? Is it 4 medical schools you're allowed to apply to?
Yeah, you can do, so 3 UCAS, you can do 4 medical schools and then 1, like anything else you want.
Okay.
I will try to remember. I remember like 3 out of 4 of those. Wait.
3 out of 4 is better than 0 out of 4.
Cambridge, because you can only choose between Cambridge and Oxford. You can't apply to both. So Cambridge, UCL.
Yeah.
Leeds.
Okay.
I think it might be Imperial. The Imperial.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So that's like obviously targeting the kind of the pretty academic end of things. Okay. Great. So this is kind of just a quick kind of explanation for anyone who doesn't know. Cambridge and Oxford are structured around these colleges. So the way Vaishnavi and I know each other is that we both applied to the same college. We both studied at the same college, Christ's. So Vaishnavi, why did you choose to apply to Christ's? Is it because some people do say it is because it was listed first alphabetically on the UCAS form? Is that your reason? Please say no.
Well, it's not entirely the reason, because what I did was I didn't get to come to UK before applying. I was in New Zealand that time, and it's a 30-hour trek. Generally, also like £800. So I didn't really do that. So I didn't get to come here. So I was virtually kind of looking at options. And when I was applying, Christ was the first there. And I started looking through the names and kind of reading up about the universities. About the colleges. And so I saw Christ and I was like, that seems like a cozy community. It's not like too big, not like too touristy, because personally I thought that would get a bit annoying.
Some of the bigger colleges like Trinity and John's do have a lot of tourists going around all the time, and King's especially,
And also I think personally I prefer smaller communities, because they seem to like, it's friendlier when you know like almost everyone there.
Really nice,
yeah. And also because like the location seemed really nice, because from what I knew, like it was like a 5-minute walk from basically everything. And
very centrally located.
I'm not a morning person, so I loved that. that I wouldn't have to bike like 20 minutes to get to all my lectures. Because I'll be honest, when you're looking at them online, if you haven't been to any of the open days, they all sound very similar. They all kind of say, we're the best at this, we're the best at this.
Yes.
They'll tell you to look at some Tompkins table or something on Wikipedia, but it is really difficult to tell what's the best for you. They all sound very similar. So don't overthink it, because I've never seen anyone come here and be like, shit, I should have chosen some other college.
Yeah. Yeah, I know.
I said shit.
I agree with you. To recapitulate without yes, in different language. I agree with Vaishnavi that the college, people do overthink it a lot. But I think good ways to decide are the size of the community. So Christ is sort of middle-sized college, I'd say, because you get really small ones like sort of Peterhouse and Corpus Christi, I think, are examples of really quite small colleges.
Trinity Hall, I think.
Trinity Hall as well. It's sort of between 60 and 80 in a year, right?
Yeah.
Maybe even less. And then Christ is sort of 120, 130
It's
in a year.
got like 14 medics, which is actually mid to high for medicine.
Right,
But,
yes. And then some colleges sort of have hundreds of, like Trinity, I think, has hundreds of undergraduates in a year. So there's quite a lot of variation. So that's quite good. Also, I think there can be it can be good to think about, I think this matters more at sort of postgraduate level when you need grants for research, but how wealthy the colleges can somewhat impact your education. I don't know if you think this, Vash, but
as an international student, I think very limited options and bursaries for medicine. Right. Some colleges do give it, but I think you should check maybe the list, because a lot of times what happens is a successful alumni for some subject will leave it with the college.
Did you succeed? You got one at Christ, did you?
No, there's nothing for medicine.
Annoying. Yes, okay.
It's kind of like they will, if you have financial hardship, they will help you. If you can't prove it, then it's more difficult.
Yeah.
To get like a merit-based scholarship on its own.
Right. Okay. Yes, but it's a big concern for a lot of international students, isn't it? The financial side of things. Yes. Okay. But yes, I agree with Vaishnavi. Echo the sentiment of don't overthink the colleges. There's, some are older, some are newer, some are smaller, some are bigger. In the end, you're still applying to Cambridge if you do and you choose to apply to Cambridge. Okay. So yes, did you do any? I know you said that you weren't dead set on medicine because you had split interest, but did you do any sort of activities in senior school to help with your application that you thought, oh, this will look good on a resume for an academic university, whether I apply for engineering or medicine? So work experience. Can you tell us a little bit about the activities you pursued to kind of improve any applications?
Yeah, of course. I think instead of thinking like what would look good on a resume, I kind of just seeked opportunities and took them up as they came, like if they interested me. So like, for example, through my school, like the lecturers at my school, teachers, whatever you call them, they were really active in terms of like, I was in a high school in New Zealand that they would be like, oh, there's this talk at the University of Auckland. Would you guys want to go? Or
right, yes. Okay, I see.
So that's really helpful when the teachers themselves are bringing opportunities to you. Otherwise, you can always ask them and be like, do you know something I can do?
That's a very good point. Ask your teachers. Yeah. Any contacts, any ideas, yeah.
And so I did a lot through my physics teacher because he was really like helpful. So I went to like a CERN masterclass. I went on a trip to I went to Houston. So I went to NASA as well. And I did like a 5-day space camp thing, kind of like understanding about aeronautical engineers and stuff like that. And then I took part in this research-based tournament, which is called International Young Physicist Tournament. So a lot in physics. Then for medicine, I did mainly work experiences. It was for me easier to get work experience when I went back home in India because the medical system in New Zealand was a bit it was difficult to shadow doctors.
Right. Okay. Yes.
So
yes.
I think for me, India, it's like if you have contacts and you try to ask someone, sometimes it was quite private. If you know someone or if someone knows someone, it's quite easy to kind of just sit in the clinic or in the hospital and just see what's happening. So I did that in the holidays. I went to India and I shadowed a lot of doctors and stuff in hospitals. But I think at the end of the day, the fact that I did a lot in physics just helped my medicine application more.
Really? In what way?
Because the fact that I was targeting academic universities, right? Like, they don't care about my research project or what it was in. It's not like that is helping me. It's the fact that I have the skills needed to do research. The fact that, like, because at the end of the day, you need to have the academic rigor and, like, to do it, and the interest, and to go through with it and be really passionate about it. And if you show that you have passion and that you've done it before and you know how it works, I think they love that. And it also shows that you're versatile because you have many interests and you've done it before. So I don't think it hurts. If you want to try different things, don't be like, oh, I must do everything in medicine. Like, try what you like. As long as you're interested in it, they'll love it.
Because you can also, I think it's actually, I'm finding sort of similar situation with job applications, but if you do, it's definitely, I think it's good advice. If you can't get medical work experience and you're applying for medicine, you can still kind of emphasize the transferable skills. I think it's a term we hear a lot, but, right? If you do, as you say, if you did research in physics, you show that you are still, able to do research. And if you're applying to a research university like Cambridge, you're emphasizing that you're still very independent and you're bright enough to be able to pursue it on your own, and that you're curious, intellectually curious, etc. So there's definitely aspects of other experiences that you could pull out and emphasize in sort of personal statements in applications.
And also stuff like, because I did one of the physics tournaments, and one of the things was
the Olympiads.
It was an international like physics tournament, but the one based in New Zealand. So they do like country fest and they go international. So that kind of showed that I had to do research, then make a presentation about it, and then present to a panel, and they ask questions. That shows confidence as well. So So things like that. They're looking for skills. They're not looking for like what you've done in the past, because a lot of times you start from the scratch at universities anyway. It's not like your A-level knowledge helps you. It's the fact that you learn well that helps you.
Yes, no, strongly agreed. So having touched on the question of applications and how to make your application look good, I think if we can move on to personal statements, the dreaded personal statement. So I know you're in fourth year now, so it's been a while since you wrote your personal statement, but is there anything you can remember about the personal statement? How did you go about structuring it? Did you ask anyone to look over it to help you? What research did you do? How did you go about writing the personal statement, this successful UK application?
I think personal statement is something like everyone spends a lot of time on and kind of worries about a lot. It has to be perfect. But at the end of the day, it just has to reflect you as a person and your interests, what you've done till now. So I think it's important just to be honest in it. And just kind of it's not a resume, it's also important to remember that. So it's like you go through things you've done, but it's more important to kind of be like, I did this, but then really expand on what it taught you, why it connects to your interest, and how you'll use that in the future. So a lot of people make the mistake of just listing. What I did was looked at examples, and the good ones I thought were like ones that focused on the things that helped them the most. For example, a work experience that stood out, maybe a really small encounter that stood out, sometimes even nothing related to medicine, just something from their life that kind of was a turning point for them. And then that was like, yes, I would want to do medicine. So what I did was focus on those kind of moments in like paragraphs, and just expanded on them, just kind of said, yeah, I did my work experience here. I saw this. When I saw this, I felt this, and I thought I had these qualities. And it was a good way to put them into action in my profession. So it kind of just went through like that.
I think that's a really great point, because I've obviously, the Oxbridge deadline, I think by the time you guys see this will have just passed, or the medicine deadline for UK applications for this year. But I've, worked with a lot of people doing their personal statements. And I think something that comes up time and time again is this idea of, what did your experience teach you? Because that's so interesting that you say that you've independently brought that up. But it's, it isn't just a list. It's not a CV. It's this, therefore this, and especially with something like medicine, it's demonstrated, I think on all the university websites it says this, but it's demonstrated you have the qualities required to be a doctor, which is you need so many different qualities to be a successful doctor, right? Yeah. So I think it's more in some ways more than any other subject, because there's a direct vocation always, pretty much. you really need to use your examples well. It's not just listing them, it's taking advantage of what you've done to demonstrate. They're your tools, so it's a question of using those well. Absolutely. Okay, I think that's some very good ideas on personal statement. So next stage of the application is the interview, right? That's did you have to send materials to Cambridge and the test? So yeah, what was the next stage actually? Because we had different experiences.
So for me, as I said, there are two tests. There are Bmat and UCAT. UCAT happens before even you submit the application. So a lot of times people like that because you do the UCAT and you see if you performed well in it. If you didn't, then you choose the Bmat universities instead, if that makes sense.
I see.
And so Bmat happens after the application. So the application deadline, I think it's 15th. It's around about now.
I think the 15th of October. Yeah,
15th of October.
Yeah.
It's the same date every time.
Always the same. I think. Yeah.
And Bmat is usually first week of November, if I'm not wrong.
Okay.
But there are. I think maybe they meet 2 dates a year or something. Don't quote me on that. But so Bmat is the next step. So they look at your application, they look at your score, and then they call you in for an interview. I don't know how they decide if you qualify for an interview or not, because we are not told that. But usually if you get called for an interview for Cambridge, it's around December, I think.
Yes. But do you have to sit, because when I applied for languages, I had to sit an additional sort of a separate test at interview. Some subjects you sit before interview, but with medicine, is this official UK CAT and Bmat? Are they the only ones you have to sit those kind of nationwide tests?
Bmat is the only one. Unless they need, so for me, they needed a language proficiency test.
Because
I had international, nothing else.
Okay, yes, that's something to remember actually for internationals. You need to, I think all the information is on the website, but you need to organise some proof of your English level. That's a good point. So yes, the interview itself, how did you prepare for it, and what was it like when you actually got there? Was it different to what you expected? Was it similar? What was the structure?
I didn't know what to expect, I'm going to be honest. It was a very broad interview. I knew that it was an academic college, so the interview would be more not just about me and my interests, it would be also scientific questions. But then it's so broad. Medicine is so broad, and I was like, what will they ask me? I didn't know. So I kind of just read up on the interviewer before, actually, because they do give you the details about who's interviewing you. And that's one of the tips I'd say. Read up on an interviewer, because a lot of time, because they're doing research on it, they will be more comfortable in that area and they will ask you questions about that. So for example, my interviewer, I still remember, was I think he was doing research on basically mitochondria physiology.
Okay.
And he was doing a lot of research. They even went up the Himalayas and tested people physiology there and stuff. So I read up on him, and then I read up around it. I was like, that's quite cool. And so when I went into the interview, as I thought, he did ask me about mitochondria.
There you go. Interesting. Yes, that's a great tip then. Something similar happened to me, kind of. Although I didn't read up in advance, I didn't think that way. But as I mentioned, Dante, this author of my personal statement, and I walked in and my interviewer said, "Oh, it's great because I'm a Dante specialist." And I just went,
"Oh, nice."
I'll go. But obviously, because they're going to have a lot of expertise. But you're right, reading up on your interview is actually a really good tip. Yeah. And
also, I think, because I went on and on in my application about physics, probably, he asked me a lot of physics-based questions about mitochondria as well.
Okay.
Just testing me if I was actually
being authentic.
Yes.
Yes.
So they will look at your personal statement and try to see if you are genuine or if you just kind of put some random content in.
Yes. Agreed. So being
whatever you've written on the personal
statement,
you should go through it. Or just don't lie on it.
Yes. Yes, I agree with you.
I think the kind of questions, if I'm right, they asked me were so I think there's a structure to the medicine interviews that I've talked to my friends as well about.
Okay, yeah.
They start with a more open question and then they go from open to specific. So they'll ask you very what do you think this for example, exercising has an effect on mitochondrial function? Let's say they'll ask a very broad question, and when they first ask it, it sounds so complicated that most people but I think I think the main tip I would give is just kind of stay calm, because they're not expecting like a correct answer.
No.
Just explain your thought process, because what they want to know is how you think more than if you know the content, if that makes sense. So just talk them through how you would approach the problem, and then automatically they'll start asking like more specific questions. They'll be like, oh, how do you think that works? Blah, 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 blah. And eventually they'll guide you through to the answer.
Okay.
So, and they don't expect like an answer at any point. It's more like, if you know the answer, great. But if you know the answer, they'll just ask another question because they want to see how you think. So they'll kind of keep probing till you don't know. Yeah. And then they'll be like, what do you do in this situation? It's basically all I can say.
Sure. Interesting. No, that's a great point. It's the idea of not having to give, or not being expected to give even a concrete answer, but it's trying to examine your thought process, because I guess we're talking about, Cambridge, but the structure of teaching at Cambridge, there's sort of a system called supervisions, which is kind of 3-on-1 or 2-on-1 or 1-on-1, maybe a bit more in medicine, but basically it's you and an expert in a field, and that is kind of how questions work. That's how discussion works. They'll probe you on something you've written in an essay or on a problem sheet, depending on your subject, and they really do kind of push the limits of your thinking. Yeah. So they're kind of trying to see if you're appropriate, if you think in an appropriate way to fit in at the university, right? Would you kind of agree with that?
I would say the interview is actually very similar to the supervisions I've had here.
Yeah.
In the sense that like, they don't expect much. They just want to see how you think. So
how you think, yes. They expect nothing and everything sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, that's really useful. I think that's a lot of good tips about the interview. So did you do it online, or did you have to come to the UK?
I don't have to come to the UK. I actually didn't come till the university started. But for India, I think they conduct interviews in Mumbai, Singapore, and places like that. So so a few like professors fly over and go there, and they take 20 interviews a day or something. So I just kind of went to the venue in Mumbai, and kind of there were a lot of students just scrolling through the books, and I was just there like, no book is going to help you. But
you're right.
Yeah.
Too late. Yes. Yeah. Interesting. Okay, so they kind of do it out there, but in person, I guess things might be different. But
there are 2 interviews, because that one's non-specific. There's one person coming to do all the medicine interviews, one person for all the economics, blah, blah, blah. So it's not college specific because of that reason, whereas home students are interviewed by their college. So because of that, what happens is and if you're doing it in India, you'll get interviewed by one person for medicine, and then your college will probably fix up an interview with you over Skype. But that's more personal. That's like, you have to know about you have to know about your interests. You have to know about NHS, you have to know about the healthcare system, you have to know why UK. So stuff like that you get asked as international, why did you choose us?
Why us? Yes. Okay, that's brilliant. Yeah, I didn't realize that's how the interview process worked as an international student. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, so I think we've discussed the application process in quite a lot of detail now, and I think you've given a lot of useful information, to be honest.
I've said everything I remember.
Yeah, exactly. Unless you can think of anything else. I think maybe we kind of just go on to, do you have any other comments about applications that you think is useful, or can we go on to discussing kind of Cambridge life?
I think the only unique thing I could talk about was interview. So I probably
good stuff. Yeah, no worries. That's great. Okay. So I think we did touch on this at the beginning, but can you just explain again what the structure of the Cambridge medicine course is like, with this preclinical clinical structure, and how is it different to other universities? Do other universities have this structure to any others, or is it just a Cambridge thing? So just a bit of a recap on that, if that's all right.
Yeah, of course. So Oxbridge follow this traditional course, which I think is something they've had from since they began or something. Change is not something Oxbridge takes well. So, basically the course is 3 years of preclinical, which is mainly like academic. So first year you'll do stuff like anatomy, physiology, biochemistry. Second year you do stuff like pharmacology, and then neurobiology and stuff like that. So you're learning all the content, which is not only clinical. So it's not only like you're learning about diseases in medicine, but also a lot of the academic side of it. Like,
is that a Cambridge thing, as you say? the going
Yeah,
further?
I'd say it's an Oxbridge thing.
An Oxbridge thing.
And
Okay,
then that year, after doing this, you can choose something to kind of specialize in. You can choose literally anything. A lot of people choose like one of the modules they did in the previous 2 years. So you go deeper into that and you choose like a research project. But a lot of other people also choose like completely different things like history, engineering, modern language, for example.
Apparently they used to do it language. You could just have a free year to explore your interests.
Yeah, it's like, and some people actually change after that. Like some people choose engineering in third year and they're like, actually, I like this more. And they go into that. Or some people, I know one of our professors who taught us ethics in first year. He did 2 years of medicine, then he did law. And then he just went to medical legal lawyer. And yeah.
Yes. Okay, interesting. Did you do engineering? Sorry.
No, I just did cited physiology because I liked it. In the first year. So I just kind of expanded on that and did a project.
Okay.
But yeah, so that's the traditional course is that in the first 3 years. And the next 3 years are like clinical. So you start working in a hospital. I won't know as much about that because it's my first year in clinical now. But till now, what's been happening is it's divided into regional and teaching blocks. So in regional, you go to a hospital in one of those 8 hospitals near Cambridge. And you just kind of follow doctors, see how hospitals work, see the cases, but there's not much learning happening there. There's like limited learning because whatever you see, you learn, but that's different for everyone, right? Someone might be in a hospital which gets more cardiac cases. Someone might be in a hospital which gets more blah cases. And then the teaching blocks, they actually have lectures, which everyone gets the same teaching. So it's kind of like that.
Okay, with you. Okay, so it's that very much divided structure then. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and so that's Oxbridge. And with other universities, it's just like, I think they follow the structure that they start teaching, like the scientific, not scientific, what do you call it? The academic, like stuff like anatomy, physiology, blah, 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 at the start, the same, but they also give you some clinical experience. So, and that gradually increases over the 5-6 years. So you'll gradually spend more and more time at the hospital as you go up.
Okay. Yes. Okay. So that's where they kind of differ.
That's called an integrated course, I think.
Right.
But yeah.
So actually on the sort of, again, on the kind of preclinical, clinical topic, could you give a sort of an example of sort of a day in the life soon to be Dr. Vaishnavi Gupta at sort of the preclinical and the clinical stage, just kind of a rough idea of, I know it varies a lot, but if you could kind of just, for example, like just an example day.
Yeah, of course. I think it's really, really different. I'm still like getting used to my clinical life. So
of course,
preclinical life is like, preclinical medic is like any other student at the university. It's like the same structure. You have, apart from the fact that you have more lectures, but yeah. So you have like 5 contact hours a day on average. You'll have maybe 2 or 3 lectures or like a practical. So on average, 5 contact hours a day. And you tend to have like 2 or 3 supervisions a week as well. So it's a combination of lectures, practicals, and supervisions.
Okay, I see.
And well, they say you technically have weekends off, but you never really do because there's always at least one essay due, which people spend a lot of time on, even though the actual essays, the exams are much easier. Like people who write essays during the year, they like 2,000 word essays with like extensive reading.
With the same the humanities, yeah.
So preclinical is very much like you don't really have weekend off. You work a lot, but it's not as many hours that you have to be at the place, if that makes sense. But there's a lot of work you have to do after your contact hours. Yes. Whereas clinical is like you go to the hospital, you do the learning, and after you're out, you're free.
Right. Okay.
But they do tell you to like revise from the first 3 years because if you're forgetting things, you can't just go in and be like, I don't know what a heart is. So I think they kind of tell you to balance clinical with a bit of reading, but less newer content is taught.
Okay. So
it's more like using your previous knowledge in the clinical context. So it's a bit easier in that aspect, but longer hours.
Less intellectually taxing. for sure, right? But it's more quite, I suppose, emotionally demanding, constantly being at work.
It is quite demanding.
Seeing patients all of a sudden. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's really new. You're thrown into a hospital when all you know is like book knowledge, textbook knowledge, and now suddenly you're in front of the patient, they're having a lot of symptoms, it's all over the place, and you're like not sure.
For sure, this is one of the most overwhelming sort of couple of weeks, right? The first couple of weeks of starting clinical. So thanks for taking time as well to kind of between just trying to survive hospitals. Like, thank you for speaking to us. Okay, so that's really useful, the explanation of the different types of, the kind of different lifestyles of the preclinical and the clinical. So I think just, again, a little more before we kind of wrap up, just a little bit more about Cambridge itself and Cambridge student life, the non-academic side of things, I suppose. So what is your experience of Cambridge student life, kind of campus and college life, and do you enjoy it? Would you say there's a particular type of student and medical student that's kind of suited to the sort of the Cambridge medical student life? Just talk to us a little bit about your kind of the extracurricular or just kind of the social side of things.
I think as soon as you come to university, there is no right personality because there's so much flexibility that you choose what is more important for you and you work that way. Like, for example, there is a lot of diversity in our like year group in terms of some people really, really enjoy the academic side and social life is less important. And so after lectures, I'd spend a lot of time reading, a lot of time focusing on essays. They want to make it as perfect as possible because for them, the future is very clear. For example, let's say like they're sure they want to do research. So give it the most. And that's not a wrong choice because, well, they know what they care about and they're giving more time to it. But there are some people who are like, I'm at university, I want to enjoy, I want to make friends. Yeah. So obviously that don't lack off, don't like fail your exams, don't not do your essays. So, I mean, I think I fell into the category of like, I love having my social life. So it can be a bit difficult at Cambridge trying to balance social life and academia because especially because there are a lot of people performing really well. And sometimes you feel like an expectation, which is good. You're at a good university. There are expectations attached to it. But but there's so much happening at university all the time, societies, events, formal dinners, other stuff.
Everything,
And you kind of have to choose that let's say you maybe hang out with friends and do activities like maybe 2, 3, 4 days a week, and then the rest you give to your academic work. I think basically there's no right answer for this because you just choose what you want to prioritize.
Sure. Great. I think, as you say, you're right. It is very intense, particularly at Cambridge, because the terms are only 8 weeks long. I think the structure of that changes slightly at the clinical, doesn't it? But clinical years.
Yeah, clinical, you have like barely any holidays. You have like 8 weeks off or something.
Okay, horrible. But the pre-clinical, at least with like undergraduates, there's basically 8 week long terms, which is very short, and especially for the science subjects, for medicine, engineering, very intense, I think. Yeah. Yes. But that's a good point. I think there's a variation. Like you can make your university experience, your medical school experience your own, right? Kind of last question really, because I think you've talked to us in a lot of detail about Cambridge medical student life. That's really, really helpful for a lot of people. So any kind of final tips to make your application stand out? If you can just imagine you're kind of writing your personal statement again and you're like, I want to go to Cambridge, and any last tips to kind of get yourself in that mindset and that? Because you said a lot.
My main tip would be, well, firstly, no one really knows how a university chooses a student, because when you come in, you will be put in with a lot of different people. There's no like a prototype that a university wants, right? And I think that's important to keep in mind, because that just kind of tells you that don't try to like fit a mold. Don't try to be like, because a lot of people like a personal statement should be this, like my experience should be this, because they're going to be shown so many of those. Maybe do something that stands out, do something that you're actually interested in, and kind of just show the university that like, you're a person who really pursues their interests and like has I don't know.
Fantastic. You're not just kind of a robot. Yeah.
Yeah. So don't try to stand out. Maybe it is a difficult thing to do, but like, because I know like in sixth form, it's like you're doing A levels and you're applying to universities, you're trying to get experience. So it's really difficult to kind of do things that make you stand out. But yeah, if you're given an opportunity that's like, this is really cool, don't be like, does it fit the thing that's what the university needs? Just do it. I'd say.
Just do it. All right. Okay. Fantastic. To end with that kind of Nike quote. Absolutely great. Thanks so much, Vaishnavi.